Anita Taylor talked to us at the Jerwood Gallery in Hastings about her own drawing practice, the importance of drawing in education, and the development of the Jerwood Drawing Prize. Do you remember when you began to draw and why?
I began to draw at a very young age. Drawing's something that I've always done, and being a really primary means of communicating, expressing, seeing the magic of drawing, seeing something appear on paper as a child all the way through. And when I went to art school, really I found that I could resolve the ideas that I had, the things that I wanted to deal with pictorially, more economically through drawing. It seemed a better equivalent in many ways to what I wanted to deal with, which were quite complex figurative compositions, if you like, and it meant that drawing had an economy. The ideas were really quite tonal in nature, if that makes sense. They were very much about light illuminating things, and for me, working through drawing all the way through my degree programme was something that was really fundamentally important.
So light illuminating something creates form or reveals form. Is form important? That you're doing a trickery of turning two-dimensional into something.
I'm interested in what the light reveals, both metaphorically but also in terms of pictorially. The idea that it is revealing form, the form is revealing an inherent set of qualities about what I'm wanting to depict. And drawing for me is something that's exploratory. It's something where I'm not necessarily aware what I'm doing or what I'm thinking until I see it. So the act of drawing is very much an extension of thinking for me, and things are realised by making marks on paper and understanding that.
When and where and why did you begin the drawing exhibition open? Before it was the Jerwood Prize. So when did all of that happen and why?
Back in 1994 I was head of painting at Cheltenham School of Art in University of Gloucestershire, and we were running a very structured programme. So it was based on lots of really good thinking about art education pedagogy. It was a very structured programme, and we introduced our students in painting to the fundamental principles of visual language through a 4-week block of different kinds of drawing. We then took them through systems in painting as well, but it was really about teaching them different systems of drawing, giving them a vocabulary and an understanding of what drawing was and what it meant and why it was used in certain contexts. So we were, if you like, teaching a visual art history, if you like, to some degree.
Did you introduce that? Was there any of that before?
I inherited a course. I've always seen myself as a custodian within art education, and very much picking up what is there and making sense of it for the future. So I believe very much that there's a very long tradition of art school education. The school I was teaching in I knew very well and had actually been taught through that system, which had been changed and updated, but fundamentally held on to principles about visual language and an induction, if you like, into really key and important areas of practice for painters, so that they were equipped, they had skills, facility and confidence to do anything once they'd gone through this programme, which wasn't diagnostic in the sense that it wasn't testing them as to where they wanted to go or where they should go, but it was diagnostic to a degree in that it was about them being able to diagnose what kind of language fitted what kind of idea that they then might want to deal with through their own work. And the drawing element of that was really fundamentally important to the idea of both mapping, of observing, translating 3 dimensions into 2 dimensions, dealing with invented language, subjective language, and it really dealt with a whole range of different practices, the way that we apply drawing, so documenting, recording, observing, and also imagining, creating and understanding different things that were reflected back through the act of drawing. So for us, in the early 1990s, there was a moment where there weren't so many art schools still teaching a structured programme in that way. And obviously art school education changed quite dramatically, and different schools had different ethoses and, if I can say that as a word, and philosophies that changed and fitted their ethos, their philosophy. It have meant they didn't want to teach in that way. But we were finding it quite a challenge in a way for people to understand the importance of drawing and to have the trust that what they were learning was going to be significant and important. That's the trick of all teaching. You need to gain that trust for people to understand that there's something to learn through the activity that they're being taught or taught through. And we felt in a way that there was something missing. I mean, I was a principally drawing practitioner. It was very, very difficult to see any contemporary drawing in any of the galleries. I mean, there were big museum collections, but they're, for students, sometimes quite seemingly unreachable or at a distance, quite difficult to access. And we really wanted to find a way for people to understand how drawing might be used in anybody's practice, because, you know, some things are hidden or were hidden very particularly. We weren't very focused on process and exposing people's process back in the 1990s and before that. I think the research culture, which may have had some interesting impacts on contemporary art practices or other art and design practices, actually has had a fundamentally brilliant one, which is that's actually revealed process and the methodological, practical, practice-led processes for other people. And when they're not self-consciously presented, that's really valuable. But we wanted to set something up that would give us the opportunity for people both to see a lot of drawing, to start to be able to evaluate a lot of drawing, to see what people were doing, and also to gain some professional practice in terms of handling work, understanding the process of an open exhibition. So I won the Malvern Open Drawing.
When had that been running for a long time?
It had been running for 2 years. So
and who started that?
Alison Neal, Martin Pitts, and another a gallery owner in Malvern.
Were they based at? They were based in Malvern.
They were based in Malvern, and they were independent. Martin Pitts was an HMI, so he was one of the people measuring quality of art and design courses, particularly fine art, across the country. And Alison is an artist, and they had set up the Malvern Open because they also felt there was something missing in terms of the opportunity for an open drawing exhibition. They were also following another agenda, which was actually about something that was a focus outside of London, so it was also not London-centric.
Okay, so did they have a gallery or something? I mean,
no, they
just
set up
two
this project. There were 3 of them, and the Malvern Drawing Associates, as they were known, and they set up something which they really ran from home, and it was shown in quite an unprepossessing place in Malvern. And it really outgrew what they could do, and Martin by then was about to move to Middlesex to take on quite a senior role there. And they had the thing that this thing was growing, it had a life of its own, and that we'd already had the conversation about taking it in the gallery at Cheltenham.
Which is where you were based then, and you were running the fine art department.
I was running the painting department at that time.
Right.
And so we'd agreed to take on the exhibition, and then they had the moment of feeling that they couldn't handle it once they were kind of going in different directions work-wise. And we had the conversation and decided we would take it on, and obviously there was the opportunity to slightly reshape it, the idea that it would have a professional practice element, and for us that actually we had the moment where the students could start to understand this whole process of what did an open exhibition mean, but that they would also see many, many drawings coming in. And we didn't really quite know what that meant. We had £1,000 of funding as a prize from Rexall Derwent, and we inherited the prize money for that 1 year, which really is there. You know, the prizes are there to both promote an idea, they are to reward artists, but also they provide an impetus for people to engage.
A platform also,
yes.
A theatre to see what's going on.
Absolutely. And so in the first year we ran this simply with the £1,000 prize money. We didn't have a huge amount of support.
How many entrants were there?
We had around about 600.
In the first year?
In the first year of works. So we had...
And that was
1994.
Right.
And so we had a phenomenal submit. I mean, we didn't have a lot of advertising. We didn't have a huge amount of infrastructure, and we ran it with the students doing everything. So we were kind of, Alison and Martin had said, it has a life of its own, it will keep going. And we realised at that point that we needed to do something more than we had. It was a test for the institution. We had some funding from the precursor to higher education innovation funding. So we had £1,000 from that as well, I think, to deal with it. So we had a very small budget, and we had an amazing workforce who were gaining lots of fantastic experience. And we selected in the studios, and we showed the exhibition in the studios at Cheltenham, and they were phenomenal, purpose-built, beautiful painting studios. And part of its excitement was that it was drawing in a place of making. So in a way it had a very nice resonance to show it within that studio context. So we had this project which was running. We realised Rexall Derwent, for whatever reason, there was no problem, but didn't want to continue funding the following year, and we'd realised that we needed to take a year out in order to raise funds. So with the support of my then fabulous head of department, who's Frances Corner, who's now the head of London College of Fashion, we worked together to try, and it was then given a priority within the institution to develop it. So we were able to gain some wonderful sponsors and donors who helped us through those first years, including a private collector who was really phenomenal in putting up the prize money for the first 3 years that we ran. So it was it had so much energy from the artists, and it had so much energy from people wanting to submit, from the students who were learning an enormous amount, and also from the people we were able to get to help us. In the very first year, we had Anthony Green and Graham Crowley and Estelle Thompson as the panel. And we wanted somebody who had the experience of the Royal Academy as an open to sit on that and help us. And we kind of went from there. And then the following 1996, we had Peter de Francia and Deanna Petherbridge. So we were thinking, who do we want to bring to look at drawings? People who have a reputation for drawing themselves, people who have a reputation for thinking about drawing, people who've maybe curated some very interesting drawing exhibitions, people for whom drawing was central to, not their identity, but central to their professional practice. And of course for us, the beauty of that in a learning environment was the students not only understood it, and still do, understand a huge amount about how artists present their work, the process of submitting, the important learning about rejection and what that means, that it doesn't necessarily mean rejection to some degree. That you understand the process, the nature of how many people put in, the nature of a discussion about drawing held by the panels, and what that might mean in terms of what's presented or proposed as drawing, and on and on and on. And of course the students witness this wonderful dialogue that takes place.
Do you remember how many entrants were for the
for
second
the
year?
second one, not off the top of my head, but it was more. I think it was getting on for 800-900.
Yeah.
So it had it grew and it grew and it grew very quickly to being usually around 1,500.
This is 2014. It's been 20 years.
Yes.
And are you still are director of the Jerwood Drawing Prize, or what? Do you still ever select the work? Are you involved in that way?
I've never selected the work apart from when I've been formally a selector. My role as the director is to work to bring together a group of people to select the
So it's
show.
you choose who selects?
We nominate who selects. We have a discussion around that with Paul, who still works on the project, and with the Jerwood Foundation, so that we make sure we have no kind of conflict with any of the other projects. But in terms of who we put together, we're looking to put together an artist, a curator, a writer, or thereabouts, in terms of a group of people who can work together to select something from different perspectives.
But they're always focused on drawing,
Yes.
obviously.
Yeah.
What's happened is that you've created a theatre for drawing, a space for drawing which didn't exist before. And I want to ask you, how do you think that has impacted design and thinking about drawing in the UK over the last 20 years?
I think it was one of a suite of projects, if we like, that were starting to bubble up at that time. So the campaign for drawing is shortly after that, there are a whole number of initiatives around drawing. In terms of the Jerwood Drawing Prize, it has a remit, it has a framework, and that has its limitations as well as its beautiful expansiveness in terms of providing an opportunity for artists to both show drawings, to propose what they think might be drawing to a panel, and for that panel to have a really interesting dialogue about what drawing might be, what these drawings proposed to them for the show might mean, and what the value of those might be, and how they might select a show out of that, and then to think about how they might reward somebody for the excellence of something that they've got in that show. So I think what it's done is provide a conversation. I think it's also provided a very interesting resource in terms of education. We built it out of an educational remit in terms of, obviously art education looks to exemplars and exemplarship and wants to see very good things and to share ideas and work with students and to have a dialogue around that.
It's now at Wimbledon, the Jerwood Drawing Prize, and that I think is because you were working there in Wimbledon?
We still select at Wimbledon.
Okay,
the
but
project,
you did work there
yeah.
at Wimbledon, and you set up a drawing research centre.
The Drawing Research Centre, I should say, is that I moved to Wimbledon in 2003 and the project moved with me to Wimbledon along with my administrator Karen Bateson. And we then worked with the Wimbledon students in the Wimbledon studios, which brought a different dimension. I moved to Wimbledon partly because there was a centre for drawing.
Oh, there was one there already?
There was a
Who had set that
Angela
up?
Kingston was the person leading Angela Kingston.
Okay.
Wimbledon had this real remit and real interest in the role of drawing. They'd had the Sainsbury Fellowships in drawing, and they set up a centre with a project space to explore. So this was in existence. I went along, if you like, the Jerwood Drawing Prize augmented a different way of looking at drawing, and we were really keen to look at drawing as the role of drawing within practice, and whether that be across design, fine art, and so there were lots of different projects, different artists and designers in residence in the project space, and other aspects of drawing. So we were trying to set up an infrastructure to think about drawing as a field and to understand the nature and value of drawing to practitioners. And we grew the centre from that point. And then finally, once we merged into the University of the Arts London, we rolled out the Centre for Drawing across all 6 colleges.
Am I right in thinking that you're now in Bath?
I am.
Are you Dean or are you...
I'm the Dean of the Bath School of Art and Design.
Okay. And how have you brought drawing there? Have you brought drawing there yet? Is it being set up? Are you doing it?
Well, they were doing it anyway, most of the programmes, although not necessarily talking about it in the way that we've talked about it at Wimbledon, or even at the National Art School in Sydney, where I was in between Wimbledon and Bath. But what we are doing at Bath is setting up an institute for drawing. Bath School of Art and Design has a fabulous history of the Bath Academy of Art, which was a long-established art school and had very famous period when it was based at Corsham Court. One of the things we're doing there is we have the Methuen studio in Corsham Court, which we're about to launch as an artist in residence.
The
Methuen studio. It was built for Lord Methuen as an artist. And it's in the tower of Corsham Court, overlooking its capability ground.
And will it be a centre for drawing?
It's going to host artists in residence in drawing. We have a collection over there which holds quite a lot of drawings or prints. So we have a number of items over there that complement that. So they're from the history. So we have William Scott, Jim Dine, a whole number of people who were associated with the Academy. And we have a studio over there. So we're about to launch some programmes which will be masterclasses, conference-based, and we'll actually start to use Corsham as the centre for that in order to leave something at the heart of the art school, where the heart of the art school used to be. The art school is absolutely thriving in the centre of Bath, and again, drawing is a big focus. So we have a drawing focus for induction week across a number of the courses. And obviously the Drawing Prize. For the first year, we had our students working alongside the Wimbledon students. We still use the Wimbledon space to select the show, and there was something very lovely about having those students working together.
I understand you were in Sydney for 4 years teaching there. Was that at the National Art School?
Yes,
Can
it
you tell
was.
us how did you bring drawing to Sydney?
I didn't need to bring drawing to Sydney. Part of the reason to go to the National Art School, which was an opportunity to make a very beautiful, the oldest art school in Australia, into an independent higher education provider again. And it's a very small specialist art school which has drawing at its heart. And actually what was very interesting is all students drew for a day as a minimum a week as part of their studies. And the first years drew for 2 days a week. And we were able to set up, because it was seen as so important to their methodology and their philosophy of teaching. And I had toured the 10 years of the Jerwood Drawing Prize show to their very, very beautiful museum quality galleries in 2006. And we'd held a conference there which was organised by them about drawing in Australia. And one of the reasons we were keen to take the show there and to have that dialogue back then, before I went across to take up the opportunity to be director of the National Art School, was that they had a drawing prize which was of a similar age. So the Dobell Drawing Prize had been set up just before the project now called the Jerwood Drawing Prize, and in a way it was kind of mapping, trying to understand what was happening in Australia in drawing through that, and trying to understand what was happening in the UK through this as a vehicle. And we worked very closely with the Dobell. We had a Dobell Drawing School for children who were 16 to 18, which was funded by their charity to bring students from across the whole of New South Wales into the National Art School for a drawing programme. And we then developed a project to take our staff out to work with the teachers teaching those students. New South Wales is a very big geographic area, and we went out to work in schools or work with schools and their teachers to draw with them. So it was seen very much as the heart of what we did. We were able to, we had a huge drawing department, and we set up a centre for drawing alongside a residency programme. And that residency programme hosted all sorts of people from Deanna Petherbridge to all sorts of people from Korea, from
So
America.
not just
John
Australian,
Walker, John Walker
people
from Boston.
Oh gosh, so you brought people from all over the world there?
We had people from all over the world, and we worked with every museum and gallery to do that. I mean, we had artists who were working with the Sydney Biennale in residence, and we had the most phenomenal galleries. So Katie Dyer, my curator there, had worked at the Drawing Centre in New York before she worked at the MCA in Australia, and we had a phenomenal interest. So we had a drawing show every year, or a show that really focused on the role of drawing within practice. So people like Mike Parr, who's a really distinguished Australian artist, we showed his prints and drawings, and it was a really phenomenal exhibition which showed a different side of his practice in great depth. We had a whole programme that ran, and the beauty of having the gallery was this capacity again to deal with the role of drawing within different people's practice and how that might relate to both students but also a wider public domain. And we worked with the Dobell Foundation to do their 20th anniversary show.
Lovely.
So there was a very nice parallel relationship. On completing, I went out on a fixed-term contract to the National Art School to do the transition project, and on completing that, just as I came back, I was also made into an adjunct professor at the University of Sydney with Sydney College of the Arts, so I do some work with them around that. So there is a flow remaining between Australia and the UK.
Oh, that's really nice. That's very good, yes. So do you think you might bring that a bit to Bath? Are you able to do it? You're just new there, so I mean not, you haven't
Well,
been
we're setting up the residency programme. We have Lyndall Jones, who was one of our artists in residence during the Sydney Biennale, who's actually from Victoria.
Right, so
from
you've
Melbourne,
already begun.
who is about to come to do a project with the Holborn Museum in Bath, which is a light project, but does relate to drawing.
Yes.
And also Mary Scott from the University of Tasmania will be coming in the autumn.
And there's also, I understand, in Australia and the UK, between the University of the Arts and Australia, has been set up a symposium called Drawing Out.
Yes.
Does that in any way come under, or are you related or connected with that at all?
Well, I was at the University of the Arts with Stephen Farthing when those first discussions started about drawing out and that relationship with RMIT. The links with RMIT continue. Lyndall Jones is a professor with RMIT, and obviously Paul Gough is now their Pro Vice Chancellor over there, so who also has a very
Paul Gough has gone to Australia.
He has a very strong drawing practice. He's the Pro Vice Chancellor of RMIT. So there are, I think this relationship between Australia and the UK is very interesting.
It is very
in
interesting,
terms of, you know, the kind of practice that's happening and the dialogue. I'm not quite sure what it means, but there's a very interesting relationship.
There's just one last question, which you've sort of already answered in different ways, but I was looking online yesterday and reading some interviews that you've done recently. One was with the Times Educational Supplement, and they asked, why should we champion art and design in education? I would like to rephrase that and ask you, why should we champion drawing in education?
We should champion drawing in education because it's a primary means of communication. And when we say we should champion it in education, it's a primary means of communication way beyond art and design. It's fundamental to artists and designers. It's fundamental to a whole number of other disciplines. It's fundamental to how we navigate the world. We read drawings to get to places. We read maps. We doodle, we communicate fabulously through images, and I think in a global world where we don't all speak or write the same language, quite often we can actually communicate through drawing and through sign in a very different way. But really it's a very important means of communication. It's used in different ways in different disciplines, but it's really incredibly important.
Thank you.